Picture this, it's December, you've had a long, difficult, challenging year, but it's finally coming to a close. You eagerly look forward to a new year and a new beginning. This is the year that you're finally gonna eat better, you're gonna get into shape, you're gonna finally learn that one skill you've been putting off for too long. January 1st rolls around, and you're energized, you're motivated, you're raring to go. You hit the gym, you eat right, you're studying 10 hours a day. Everything's going exactly how you planned it and you're feeling great. But a few weeks later, that same enthusiasm is starting to wane. You're starting to miss workouts, you're finding that you're eating cheat meals more often than clean meals, and you're not studying nearly as much as you once were. By the time February rolls around, you're straight up back to your old ways. You haven't gone to the gym in weeks, your diet is back to fast food on the reg, and you've totally given up on learning that new skill. You tell yourself, I'll pick things up back tomorrow. But tomorrow never comes. Sound familiar? If it does, you're not alone. Every year, millions of people set New Year's resolutions, yet only a small fraction of them actually keep it past a few weeks. Now, why is that? The truth is that keeping your New Year's resolutions requires much more than just that raw motivation. It requires a plan, a system, and continuous perseverance. These are the 5 reasons your New Year's resolutions are failing and what you can do about it. First up is that you're setting the wrong goals. And when I say you're setting the wrong goals, I mean that they're just too vague. Something along the lines of, I wanna study harder, things like, I wanna get healthy, I wanna eat better, I wanna lose weight. These goals don't actually tell you much. What about your health are we actually trying to improve? What is measurable? Is it your cardiovascular endurance, your muscle mass, your strength? How much weight do you wanna lose? Are we looking at 5 pounds, 10 pounds, 20 pounds, 100 pounds, and over what time frame? And when it comes to eating better, does that mean you're trying to cut out junk food? Are you trying to limit that junk food exposure to once a week, once a month? Or are you trying to increase the amount of unprocessed healthy foods you're having? Maybe you're trying to get more veggies in every meal. If our goals are vague, we don't have a clear vision of what we're working towards. And without that clear vision, we don't actually know what steps we need to take to get there. I mean, otherwise, how are you gonna know whether or not you achieved your goal or whether you're moving closer towards it or further? You want your goals to be smart, starting with specific, meaning what exactly are you trying to accomplish? Be as specific as possible. Goals need to be measurable. How are you gonna determine how much progress you've made or once you've reached that goal? They should be attainable. Is it possible to accomplish this goal, and do you have the resources that are gonna allow you to get there? Is it realistic? A goal can be possible but not realistic because you might not be willing to realistically make those sacrifices. It has to be time specific. What are the time bounds that you're gonna meet this goal by? If you don't have an end date and it just goes on indefinitely, then guess what? Probably not gonna make that much progress. By setting SMART goals rather than vague, amorphous goals, you have a much clearer picture of what you're trying to accomplish and the steps to get there. So for example, let's say you wanna lose 12 pounds over 6 months. That's a very specific goal. It's measurable. You can weigh yourself every single week, ideally every single day, because you're gonna have a little bit of variation, so you watch the trend line over time. It's attainable and realistic. Half a pound a week over a longer period of time does require some discipline, but it is much more realistic and sustainable than going for something like 1 pound or more per week. And of course, it's time specific because we know in 6 months, here's my goal, here's the number, and either I hit it or I don't. Number 2 is that you're biting off more than you can chew. And I get it. January 1st, you're motivated, you're amped, you're pumped. You're probably a little bit overly ambitious. In that moment, when you're making these plans, you overestimate how much you're gonna care. Your future you is gonna be so much different and is gonna be so much more motivated and so much more disciplined than you currently are. The truth is, you're probably gonna be about the same. So what I found helpful is actually the practice of thinking, would I be willing to do this today or tomorrow? If the answer is no, you're probably not gonna wanna do it in a week either. And then when you pack on the studying, the eating right, the exercising every day, the sleeping 8 hours, all those things at once, it's just you're like, I don't even want to start. It's just so intimidating. I can't even make meaningful progress in one of these, let alone all 4. So what I instead suggest is that you focus on just 1 or 2 key New Year's resolutions. As you stick with these for the first several weeks, the first couple months, you're gonna build confidence, you're gonna build that momentum, and then afterwards, once you have these dialed in, then you can add on new habits. And the smaller these goals are, the more likely you are to actually stick with them. And I would argue it's much more important to be consistent with a smaller habit than it is to set a medium or slightly loftier habit and then only hit it 70% of the time. Because if you dial in the small one and you're super consistent day after day after day, then you can slowly scale that to be something larger and more significant. So James Clear, the author of Atomic Habits, which I summarized in this video right here, he explains the 2-minute rule. And the 2-minute rule says that you should start any habit with something that you can do in 2 minutes or less. And the reason is that you lower that activation energy. The friction of getting started for a 2-minute task is pretty small. It's not that intimidating. You can no longer rely on the excuse that you don't have time. And from there, you can build it up. Number 3, you're not investing enough into your goals. So here's the thing. I've been exercising pretty regularly for like 10 plus years, and I've always wanted to gain mass, get stronger, add muscle mass, get that hypertrophy, those sweet, sweet gains. And I would have periods when I was super disciplined, hitting my numbers, just bam, 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 and I'd make progress, get an injury, and then yo-yo and go back down, right? Take a couple weeks off, and then any strength gains I had were lost, I just keep going back and forth, up and down, like a yo-yo. And it wasn't until 2020 that I actually invested my money and hired a coach. And I had a lot of hesitancy before this. The main thing being like, hey, these people are way too expensive.
I went to medical school, I know anatomy, I've read the books, the papers, etc. Like,
I geeked out a lot. As you guys know, my personality, I tend to go 0 or 100. So I went pretty deep into the whole exercise, research, and theory and stuff like that. So I didn't want to for years. But if you asked me what my priorities were, and then you looked at my spending habits, you wouldn't see fitness being towards the top of the list. So there was this disconnection. And the reason it's been so beneficial in working with an expert, twofold. Number one is that I feel like I have much more at stake. I don't wanna half-ass it or miss any workouts because otherwise I'm losing my hard-earned money. And then number two is I'm working with a true expert. So sure, I can do all the research I want, but a coach that does this full time, day in and day out for years and years and has hundreds, thousands of clients is gonna have a deeper and greater level of expertise than I ever will. They're gonna see the blind spots that I myself would never have discovered. And they're gonna call me out on my BS when I'm making excuses or I have a self-limiting belief. So don't be afraid to hire an expert or take a class or invest in a more meaningful way into this goal if it's really important to you. Number 4 is that you're relying too much on the magic of New Year's. New Year's is great for giving that burst of motivation, right? You have this new year, this new slate, this new beginning. But the issue is when you rely on that motivation to keep you going week to week to month. It's just not gonna last. But the motivation is actually a good thing if you use it properly. So in that burst of motivation, create the systems that will sustain you for those weeks, for those months. Because when you're not feeling motivated on January 5th, you're not gonna wanna create the systems then. So do it now. When you have the burst of motivation, create those systems to make it easier for future you. And when I say create systems, I mean make your environment work for you rather than against you. Make your desired behaviors more likely to happen, decrease the friction there, and make your undesired behaviors less likely to happen, so increase the friction there. Food is such an easy and obvious one. So if you wanna eat fewer chips or fewer junk food, then you simply just don't buy it from the grocery store. Don't keep it in your home. Or let's say you live with someone that does enjoy the occasional treat, and it's not an option to simply not keep it in your home. That's fine, but what you can do is now keep it out of sight, because the more you see it, the more tempted you're gonna be, the more likely you are to fail and actually reach for it. As the old saying goes, out of sight, out of mind. Another example would be setting reminders, and this is actually something that I still rely on heavily to this day. So for exercise, I used to have roughly 70-75% adherence, which definitely room for improvement. By having that time carved out in the day in part of my plan and no conflicting calls, no other things that I need to get done during that time, it's much less likely for me to push it off to later in the day and then occasionally miss it. The other example is sleep. So back when I was a resident surgeon and even back before that in medical school, it was easy to fall asleep because you're just sleep deprived all the time. So as soon as your head hits the pillow, boom, lights out. But now I'm sleeping like close to 8 hours a night every single night, and sleep onset insomnia was becoming a bigger issue. And what I found out was that I was working too late into the night so that my mind would be racing. I'd be thinking about new business ideas and I'd be motivated and excited and
oh my God, let me work on this new thing.
It's like, no, Kevin, you gotta chill out, man. It's midnight. You gotta wake up in 7 hours.
So now throughout my home at 9:30 every single night, the lights will turn red. And that's my reminder to put down the laptop, stop working, get ready for bed, read a book, wind down. Another example that James Clear talks about from Atomic Habits is called habit stacking. And this is where you take one habit that you are very consistent with, and then you pair that with another new habit that you're trying to learn. So one habit I'm very consistent with is every single morning, I drink tea because tea is way better than coffee. That's right, fight me. The new habit that I'm trying to learn is going outside every single morning to get that bright sunlight, because that bright sunlight actually, long story short, it triggers a release of melatonin later in the night that's gonna help you fall asleep. So having bright sunlight in the morning, good for sleep. So because drinking tea is the well-established habit, I've paired that with drinking it outside, so I'm getting that direct sunlight, and that's gonna help me sleep at night. The other way to use systems to your advantage is having an accountability buddy. Now, the way that I use this in my life is I have a cycling buddy, and if we're planning on cycling the next day, I'm sure as hell not about to sleep in and miss that ride. Whereas if it was just me and I'm like, oh, I should cycle tomorrow, then I might make an excuse and then just do a ride on the indoor trainer upstairs, which is not nearly as fun, and I don't really push myself as hard compared to going outside in the real world. Number 5 is you're letting setbacks derail you. Look, no matter how disciplined you are, you're not gonna stick with any of these resolutions 100% of the time. It's inevitable. It is natural that you will occasionally fall off. Now, the question isn't whether or not you're going to have a setback, that you're going to trip up from time to time. The question is, how are you going to respond to those setbacks? In the grand scheme of things, one small setback doesn't do anything to your progress. It's not gonna actually slow you down from reaching your ultimate goal. What will derail you is if you let that one setback become a new habit of skipping that new habit. Does that make sense? Don't fall into the whole what the hell mentality trap where you say, hey,
I've already fallen off my gym schedule, so forget it. I'll get back on it next week or the week after that.
Or I've already messed up my eating today. I already ate a cheeseburger for breakfast. I'm not sure why you're having a cheeseburger for breakfast, but I'm just gonna forget about it and get back on track tomorrow. So for the rest of the day, I'm gonna eat junk food. What we're doing in these instances is we're kicking the can further and further down the road rather than just picking it up in that instance and taking control again. If you miss a workout one day, go to the gym the next day. Don't let yourself skip 2 days in a row. And if you eat that dozen of donuts for breakfast, then don't wait until tomorrow to eat right. Start with the next meal. Lunch, eat clean. Treat your setbacks like what they are, a bump in the road. When you're driving and you hit a bump, you don't turn back home, you keep driving. And your New Year's resolutions are no different. If you do have a New Year's resolution for 2022, stick with it. Keep creating and refining your system to make it easier so you can keep learning and growing in the process. Keep investing in yourself and in your goals. But most importantly, just keep trying. If you can do that, I'm certain that 2022 is gonna be an awesome year for you. Much love, guys, and I'll see you all in that next one.